Tonight, new details emerge about Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin as those closest to Tyler Robinson talk to authorities.
His roommate was indeed a boyfriend who is transitioning from male to female.
Where their investigation stands as Robinson gets ready to make his first court appearance. And
to follow Jesus.
The country and world continues to grieve as Charlie's widow, Erica Kirk, speaks and vows to carry on her husband's mission.
The evildoers responsible for my husband's assassination have no idea what they have done.
Plus, Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Israel.
Hamas can no longer continue to exist as an armed element that threatens the peace and security, not just of Israel, but of the world.
Can a diplomatic deal still be reached between Israel and Hamas? The secretary seems to cast his doubt. And filling out those medical forms every time you go to the doctor. The Trump administration's latest effort to simplify the sharing of your health information, the benefits, and possible security concerns. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Many Americans are still looking for answers as the investigation into Charlie Kirk's assassination begins to take shape. Good evening in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. Authorities in Utah are preparing to file capital murder charges against the alleged shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. Governor Spencer Cox says Robinson is not talking, but family members and others close to him are cooperating with investigators. FBI Director Kash Patel says DNA on a towel wrapped around a rifle found near the scene matches Robinson. They've also connected Robinson to a screwdriver recovered from the rooftop where the fatal shot came from. And new tonight, the Washington Post is reporting Robinson confessed in a Discord chat online. As the investigation continues, friends of Charlie Kirk, including high-ranking Republican administration officials and members of Congress, are focused on making sure his legacy endures. Vice President J.D. Vance, a close friend of Charlie's, hosted his podcast, The Charlie Kirk Show, today.
On a podcast a couple of months back, Charlie was asked about how he'd want to be remembered if he died. His answer, I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important thing. The most important thing is my faith, and that was Charlie. And in this dark moment for our country, I think that's the greatest lesson any of us can take from Charlie. To have faith in the Lord, and to be bold in how we glorify him.
And Tyler Robinson is scheduled to make an initial court appearance tomorrow. Joining us now, CBN News senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright and Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections and a Faith Nation contributor. Gentlemen, welcome. Kelly, you know, this is hitting people really hard, for people who loved Charlie, for people who didn't, but were horrified by how his life was taken from him. For conservatives, for Christians, people who shared many of his beliefs, it has been a really, really heavy week. The outpouring, massive. The gospel has been shared a lot. The Trump administration, Kelly, honored Charlie at the Kennedy Center this weekend. What can you tell us about that and the other things the White House is doing to remember Charlie Kirk?
Yeah, Jenna, good evening to you. It hits very close to home and hits hard here at the White House for the Trump administration. Keep in mind, the president called Charlie Kirk a personal friend of his, almost like a son to him, and he will be awarding posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Charlie Kirk, as well as attending his funeral. In addition to that, you mentioned Vice President J.D. Vance hosting the podcast today from here at the White House in tribute to Charlie Kirk, his friend, a close friend. He said everyone in this building, referring to the White House, owes something to Charlie, and he added that Charlie was a joyful warrior. He loved America and devoted himself tirelessly to making America better, and he added that Charlie Kirk was a critical part in getting Donald Trump elected as president and of course himself as vice president. It's very palpable here what's going on, and many people from the Trump administration speaking at the Kennedy Center last night, including Caroline Leavitt, who thanked Charlie Kirk for all that he deposited in her in terms of her faith and her politics, as well as her love and hope for America.
Nathan, there's of course a lot of grief. There's a lot of anger as well. Democratic Senator John Fetterman was saying that it's time to turn down the heat. He says his party needs to stop using words like Hitler to describe political opponents. House Democrat Sarah Elfreth also says the country is at a boiling point. Nathan, your thoughts on these statements, and do you think we will see some of this rhetoric tamped down?
What we're seeing is an incredibly tragic and horrific killing of Charlie Kirk, mixed with previous reality that we had, is that the Democratic Party doesn't have a clear leader, they don't have a clear message, and the Democratic Party has been divided on all sorts of issues, and this is just the latest issue with even more intensity. And so Fetterman, you have a senator from a swing state who is trying to fashion himself as a little bit more of a moderate, with a younger congresswoman. Congresswoman Elfreth is 37 years old, and I think ready to be a little more upfront, or at least she is part of the Democratic Party that is confronting the reality that Democrats have tried to respond in a human and sympathetic way, even to someone that they don't agree with, and yet Republicans are coming back at them and saying, you did this, you murdered him, you're the problem. And so that's where the Democrats are trying to wrestle with, all right, we're trying to bring down the rhetoric, but we're just being met with words of confrontation and war by some Republicans.
Yeah. We are learning more about the alleged assassin. We played that soundbite from the governor at the top. Utah governor, he says, Spencer Cox, he said that Tyler Robinson was living with his boyfriend who was transitioning from male to female. Of course, the trans issue is one of the many hot button issues that Charlie would talk about on these college campuses and debate. FBI Deputy Director, Dan Bongino told Fox News this morning that Robinson had what he said an obsession with Charlie Kirk. All that to say, the governor is saying that they're not ready to release any kind of motive yet because Robinson is not actually talking to investigators at this point. But your thoughts, Nathan, in light of all of the things that are coming out and that we're starting to learn?
We need to be ready for the reality that Robinson's motives are going to be far more complicated than what we are comfortable with or used to dealing with. That when someone comes to this point, to making this terrible decision to take someone's life, that they are dealing in a different world of reality that probably lacks some logic. And I think what's frustrating is that even before we knew Tyler Robinson's name or knew who did this, Republicans, including President Trump, really jumped to conclusions and started to use language like they did this, they killed him, even now we don't even know whether it was more than just him who allegedly did this. And so there is evidence of him being, having left-leaning views, but there's also evidence that he may have criticized Charlie Kirk for he might not have been conservative enough. And so I think this is just going to be more complicated than what we want to see.
Nathan,
and Jenna, real quickly, if I could add to what Nathan just discussed right there and described in terms of what's unfolding in America, a lot of people on both sides are saying enough is enough. It's time to come together and bring some unanimity in understanding that we have to stand together. And that's really what Charlie Kirk wanted. That's why he opened up things for debate, to have a conversation with people, albeit that some people may not have agreed with him. But the bottom line is, as we've heard from the top of this program, is that he dedicated his life to loving his faith, defending his faith, and using that as the precipice for helping people understand, the foundation for helping people understand each other.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Kelly and Nathan, thank you both.
Sure.
Well, Homeland Security experts warn the threat environment in the U.S. today is at an all-time high after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. They point to the divisive rhetoric ranging from social media to politicians for potentially fueling acts of violence. And then you add to that America's enemies spreading disinformation to create even more volatile and dangerous conditions. National security correspondent Caitlin Burt tells us why this can also directly affect faith-based organizations. Caitlin?
Jenna, a report from the Family Research Council shows attacks on churches and other institutions have skyrocketed over the last 5 years, and many share one common thread.
The vast majority of those incidents, we have found that the people involved in this activity were motivated by content they saw online.
Counterterrorism expert John Cohen with the Center for Internet Security says religious institutions are frequently targeted by individuals who see violence as their only outlet.
We are a very divided nation, and it's not just that people tend to disagree with each other, but they are increasingly viewing those that disagree with or that they disagree with as the enemy.
Mental and behavioral health issues can also play a role.
We have far too many young people who are from a behavioral health perspective struggling. They're struggling with their sense of community. They're struggling with their sense of belonging. They feel like they've been treated unfairly in life, and they gradually develop this intense sense of anger.
Cohen says this can cause them to believe their only way to feel value is by either committing suicide or mass murder. A CIS threat analysis found this to be a factor in the recent shooting at Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis. Meanwhile, both foreign and domestic adversaries often widen the nation's growing divide through disinformation and encouraging violence.
In most cases, the content is specifically intended to fan the flames and exploit some of the most divisive issues facing the country.
In the wake of Kirk's assassination, CIS reports neo-Nazi groups, anarchists, and Russian state media accounts have all pushed false narratives. While these bad actors often target faith-based institutions, Cohen says this community of believers also has an important role to play.
You know, as we talk about solutions potentially, is working to, in a sense, restore a faith within the young people of this country who, in far too many cases, have come to believe that their life is just not worth living anymore. Another important role that I think our faith leaders can play is to cool some of the divisive rhetoric that has become so prevalent in our society.
When it comes to prevention and protection, Cohen encourages religious institutions to look beyond just physical attacks, as adversaries are using digital espionage to specifically target systems like websites, event calendars, and other sensitive data. Jenna?
All right, Caitlin, thank you. And coming up, the Secretary of State in the Middle East. What came of his meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? That and more when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. As the Israeli military continues its assault on Gaza, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in Israel today to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. As much of the world shows growing outrage for the continuing war and the humanitarian crisis it's causing, the two men showed a united front.
As far as the president's been clear on the ongoing issues in Gaza, and that is that every single hostage, both living and deceased, needs to be home immediately. Hamas can no longer continue to exist as an armed element that threatens the peace and security, not just of Israel, but of the world, and that the people of Gaza deserve a better future, one that cannot begin until Hamas is eliminated and until all of the hostages, both living and deceased, are home.
And today's meeting comes less than a week after the IDF targeted Hamas leaders in Qatar. After he leaves Israel, Secretary Rubio will be traveling to Qatar. And for more on this, let's bring in retired Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, former IDF spokesperson, senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and co-founder of Bottom Line Media. Colonel, welcome. So what did you make of the united front we saw today from Secretary Rubio and Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Hello, thanks for having me on. I think we heard stellar words of leadership from Secretary Rubio, speaking on behalf of the president. It is, it's a sight for sore eyes for Israelis to get international support. Israel is very much dependent on the steadfast support of the American administration. And Israel finds itself in a crucial time here where now Israel is making a very big move, hopefully final big move against Hamas in Gaza City. And it needs international, but most importantly, American support in order to get the job done. And the visit of Secretary Rubio, I think, comes at a crucial time. And it's exactly the words and the deeds that Israel needs in order to be steadfast, in order to have the stamina and the capacity really to fight this out and defeat Hamas.
Do you think, is there fear in Israel, after the attack in Qatar, that U.S. support could be waning? Axios reporting that Prime Minister Netanyahu actually called President Trump before the strike on Hamas in Qatar. Is there a concern in Israel that that could hurt relations with the United States?
Of course. I mean, sadly, Qatar is a powerful country that has bought a lot of influence around the world and in the US, in Washington, in US universities, in think tanks, in financial institutions, in the stock market and real estate and many other places. So Qatar, sadly, is a powerful country. And I think that they probably didn't like it, that Israel exposed exactly how welcome and how harbored Hamas terrorists were in Qatar by the Qatari authorities, and that's an inconvenience for them. And I'm sure that they're angry. Judging by what we've seen so far, it looks as if the Trump administration is doing damage management and outwardly is downplaying it and then doing some very high-level, clever diplomacy behind closed doors. And I think that Secretary Rubio is probably the one masterminding that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, yes, it's a concern. Yes, the Qataris, unfortunately, are important for the U.S., but they are bad actors in the Middle East. And I think it's way past due that they are exposed for the bad actors that they are.
So we don't have long, but I do want to ask you, Secretary Rubio, he did seem to cast some doubt today on the idea of Israel and Hamas still being able to reach a diplomatic deal. Do you agree with him on that, and how did you see that?
Sadly, I think he's right. Secretary Rubio is a very wise man. And I think, Israel has given lots of opportunities, lots of big windows for diplomacy to work and for Hamas to take the diplomatic way out and to surrender, lay down their weapons, release our 48 hostages, and by doing so, really ending the war. Okay. Hamas has that option. They've decided not to take it, and unfortunately, Israel will probably have to expand military operations.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, always good to see you. Thank you. And up next, President Trump wants to make healthcare high-tech. The benefits and the privacy concerns some are raising after this. Well, if you've been to the doctor's office, you, of course, know the tedious process of writing down all your medical history and then, of course, having to do it all over again the next time. Well, the Trump administration wants to replace all of that writing with modern technology. Medical reporter Lori Johnson explains the reasons for the move and how some are raising concerns about privacy.
President Trump, along with HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Dr. Oz, Administrator for Medicare and Medicaid, touted the plan to simplify sharing health information with any doctor or pharmacy.
Today, the dream of easily transportable electronic medical records finally becomes a reality.
As part of the Making Health Technology Great Again, they appeared alongside CEOs of top tech firms like Google, Amazon, Apple, and OpenAI.
Instead of filling out the same tedious paperwork at every medical appointment, patients will simply be able to grant their doctors access to their records at the push of a button. Just a button and you're all set, and all the information the doctor needs will be immediately transmitted.
Smartphone apps store your complete health history, which would be instantly shared by scanning a QR code.
And it shows your height, your weight, your blood type, your BMI, your cardiac markers, your diabetes markers, your cholesterol, and any kind of individualized treatments they could have.
Those in the medical field agree it's time for an upgrade to America's outdated health information sharing system.
I don't always have information from a recent hospital visit. If a patient goes to the emergency room, they may not be able to get care started as soon because the providers don't know what they're taking if maybe you come in and you're not conscious. So there are things that we would love to fix.
While these apps would involve voluntary participation from both patients and providers, they would not be linked to any government database.
In addition to storing our health information, the apps would take it a step further by using AI to interpret the data and offer personalized advice about diet, medications, exercise, and more.
Ideally, the apps would lead to improved health, especially for people with diabetes or obesity.
The key is the unlocking of the data, because the more data that AI has, the better it performs.
While this tech sounds good, privacy concerns abound because it's unclear whether security can be guaranteed, something very important when it comes to your personal, sensitive health information.
If this system were to share doctor's notes and you had a certain medication or you had a diagnosis that was more private to you, or you had clinical notes that the doctor had written that would reveal information about your progress, those would be things that most of us wouldn't just be sharing just all over the place.
Worries include insurance companies possibly discovering information and using it to increase your rate or even cancel a policy. So while most Americans would love to ditch the clipboard, privacy concerns could be a deal breaker. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Still ahead, a call to be still and know that He is God. That's next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a prayer for peace after what has been a very heavy news week. Actor Chris Pratt posted a video on X inviting viewers to pray with him. He captioned the video, "Be still," and quoted scripture from Psalm 46:10 and Isaiah 26:3.
Be still and know that I am God. In this moment, please, Lord, calm my restless mind. Quiet my anxious heart. Isaiah 26:3, you keep in perfect peace those whose minds are stayed on you. Lord, fill me with strength to turn my attention toward you, that I find rest and joy in your presence. Amen.
Amen. Pratt then encouraged viewers to turn off their phones and take a break from social media. That's a good word for all of us, and something that Charlie Kirk preached too, is taking a Sabbath from your phone. All right, that's going to do it for Faith Nation tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.